Welcome back to the Glow Up Girl podcast. I'm Kyra. Thank you everyone for joining. I am back now with Miss Rachel. So Rachel, welcome to the Glow Up Girl podcast.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. Why don't you tell the audience who you are and a little bit about yourself?
All right. So that's a loaded question, who I am. I'm still trying to figure that one out myself. But, day to day, I'm a special education teacher, and that has morphed into this whole new identity due to the pandemic. And on top of that, I am creating a series of children's books, which I did not tell you about, Kyra, but we can also get into that. When we spoke before, I talked to you about a compilation of poetry that I had written. And that came about because I was in recovery for an eating disorder and had written basically all of my feelings through poetry in 120 pieces. And I sat on it for 10 years, decided it was finally time to get it out. I had accepted what was my story. I was okay with my family for the first time, really having this raw image and idea of what I was going through. And I put it out, and the pandemic hit. Literally 3 months after it came out, and the publishing company went out, and I still have the book on Amazon. My story is still my story, but I have no publishing company. So, it's been a journey, and every day I just learn that you need to keep on going. And the last, what seems like forever, even though it's only been about 2.5 years, almost 3 years, it's just really taught me to prioritize what's important to me and making space for others to share their story, and also creating time for myself.
Yes. I could not agree with you more. I think that, something we went into, I think most people thinking was 2 weeks, right? Thinking, oh, it's going to be 2 weeks and we'll be back, has morphed into this like almost 2 years of experience. And I'm glad that you said, what you said, a lot of things in your opening there, to prioritize the things that matter, because that's important. I feel like that's what this time is giving us, because we're still essentially functioning in the pandemic and still trying to figure out, and I just always say, like, I just want to make sure that I am getting all the learnings, all the things, because I think there have been so many opportunities for us as people to learn more about ourselves and what we want for our lives, and take care of other people, and I also think too, like, just this opportunity, like you said, of sharing, giving space for people to share stories. And that is, definitely, when we spoke before, I mean, that's the reason why I started the podcast, is to give other people a room and space to share their stories, in the hopes that it will help someone else out there listening. So yes, my friend, I am right there with you. And I think, you keep pushing for it with your books, and your book that's already out there, and your new book. So just keep striving, my friend.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, it's really taught me, I've always been I think the first time we had spoke, it seems like it's probably been about 9 months since we spoke before, or since we spoke last. And I remember you and I were just connecting over social issues. And that was, I had never even met you. You were a perfect stranger. We just started talking. It was just like, this is what I live for. And that's kind of what brought about the children's books. Is there are all these topics that it's like taboo for kids to talk about, but they're going through these things, and they need a space to talk about it, and they need adults in their life to listen to them. And so, I mean, I started writing a book about childhood cancer, body image, bullying, what it's like to go back to school. It's called From Behind, and it's about going back to school from behind a Zoom screen to behind a mask, and the kids reintegrating into society. Like it's so, they're going through it and the adults are going through it, but no one's asking the kids how they are or what they're feeling.
Exactly. Yeah.
Being a teacher, I get to see these kinds of things firsthand. And it's just, that's the part about my job that makes me love my job, because I can connect with these kids on a different level.
And I think it's really interesting what you said about no one talking to the kids, because I think I remember like in the first year of the pandemic, there were so many parents trying to like create what was normal to their children, still trying to go on vacations and take them places and all these things. And I just sort of in my head, because I couldn't say anything because I'm not a parent. So I didn't feel like this was the space for me to, but I kept thinking in my head, like, I mean, are you just talking to them about like what's happening around them and the opportunities that you have as a family, as the opportunities that they have to, maybe they're writing more, maybe they're writing what's going on, what they're feeling, as opposed to everybody just trying to continue to make it feel like normal, because it's still nothing like normal. I mean, if I'm being honest, I mean, there are still things. I mean, I still haven't seen one of my parents since 2019, and so, so it's far from normal. I mean, it was, I mean, we had the plan, we were going for Christmas, but then this next wave just started to take over. And I mean, it just felt, we all made a decision as a family that it just felt like the safer, smarter thing to do, to just say, hey, we'll do what we did last year. We'll just come together digitally and talk and see each other. And, and that, while that is very like, disheartening, like I was really sad about that. But at the same time, it's like, I know the sacrifices are not for nothing, right? I mean, and in my heart, I feel like it is part of my responsibility to the world and the people in my world that I remain safe and do the right things first, and not think about just, the fact that, well, I want to see my mom.
No, it's true. I mean, it's been almost 10 days. I tested positive for COVID after going on a vacation to Mexico for New Year's. And I was like, oh, it's time to travel. We can travel. And I knew I should have pulled back, but I was like, you know what, if I get it, I get it. And I understand everyone's COVID comforts, they're all very different. And I paid the price. And thankfully I'm in a place where I'm okay. Like my job offered me that area where I was able to, I had to get a baseline test to go back to work. I had to, after that quarantine, I mean, like there were things I had to do. And yesterday was my first day going back. I had been off literally for a month for the holiday break, and then the additional time for the quarantine. I had to transition back in after a 3-day weekend. And then I had what came with it, all of the work from the first week of school that I missed because I was out. So it was like, there was really no positive about being out. So I was like, oh, I have an extra week. No, because now I have double the work in a 4-day period, and it is like out of control. And it was all because I was like, it's okay, I have this time. And if I get it, and it was just like, at the end of the day, was it worth it? I couldn't say yes, I couldn't say no, but I can tell you it wasn't worth it for how I felt for a week, because I actually did, like, I have friends who got it and were not symptomatic, but I was symptomatic.
Oh,
and so because of that, it's just like, it's not worth it. It's really not worth it.
Are you feeling better now?
I'm feeling better now. I'm back at work. I'm good.
Good. I applaud you for even telling that story, because I think a lot of people wouldn't be as transparent about, what you felt going into it, and, how you feel coming out of it. So thank you for your honesty.
That's something I've actually learned through COVID is just to be honest and be who you are. Like, not
Yeah.
everyone's going to like everything I have to say, but
Mhm,
I'm not everyone. I'm me. And so I've kind of just started to embrace that in my personal life. And
mhm,
because I think when you're vulnerable, you allow that space I was talking about for others to be vulnerable. And like,
mhm.
yeah, I know that that wasn't the smartest decision on my behalf, 100%. But like we all have to do what we all have to do in order to survive because the
Mhm.
last few years,
Exactly.
going
I
back to
mean,
what you said, finding normalcy, like what is
yeah,
that? We don't even, the word normalize has become so normalized that it's like
exactly.
a joke at this point because
It's
nobody really,
exactly.
it's just like so cliche. Oh, let's just
Mhm,
normalize that or let's normalize this. But like there's so many
mhm.
things to normalize when it's like, let's just think about how we're all connected and this affects everybody. Period.
Exactly. Yeah, that is so true. I mean, that is definitely the thing that I'm always thinking. Excuse me. Yeah, you have to do, like you said, you have to do what feels comfortable for you in that moment and what you feel. And like, obviously, if you had planned a trip for New Year's. I mean, this wasn't until, like, honestly, it wasn't until the week before Christmas that I realized that, oh my God, like this Omicron has like taken over the world. And so it was like, oh, and like my older brother went on a cruise over like Christmas holiday. And his wife, they had all planned to go on this cruise for Christmas and he didn't want to go, but he was just like, well, we've booked it and we can't move it right now. And so, and she's really, really excited. I was like, look, just go and be safe. Do what you've been doing. And I mean, it's fine. But, one thing that I did, hear somebody say, and is that, I mean, with this variant that's here now, I mean, they were like, a lot of us are going to get it because it's so contagious. I mean, it's almost just like it feels like it's almost like just getting a cold. You were somewhere, you touched something and you got it. I mean, and it's one of those things where it's like, you almost just have to just, if you get, like you said, if you get it, just take care of yourself, rest, quarantine from others but you have to move forward. Like you can't, no sense, and there's no shame in, people, getting something that is almost impossible for us to dodge right now, like almost impossible. Only way to dodge it is by just literally being a hermit and like in your house and never doing anything.
The first
So
2 weeks.
exactly. So I know that you spoke a few minutes ago about the books that you're writing, and one of those topics you talked about was body shame, and that is a story that is very near and dear to you. I know we talked about it when we first met. So can you talk about your history with body shaming and why it's so important for you to be able to educate others out there?
Yeah. So it's funny that I don't want to say it's funny, but you use the term body shaming. And I never really defined it for myself as that.
Mhm.
But in reality, that's what it was. And that's what it still is. Like from time to time, I still do this thing where I body check and I'll look in the mirror and I'm like, I don't like how this looks on me.
Mhm.
And so I do this thing where I have now been told I need to do affirmations every morning and
Mhm.
every night if I remember, but every morning. Um, and that it's supposed to help rewire my brain because I over the years have created this idea in my head, which was also something during COVID that really became apparent that I saw my body image and my eating disordered behavior as I accepted it for lack of a better term, it's a mental illness. Like how
Mhm.
I view myself is not normal because I used to be at a point where I would quote unquote weigh the options of what I was going to eat based on calories. I would figure out what I was going to do if I was going to be active in one way or another to burn off what I ate. This started at a very young age. I was very aware of my body, starting in probably elementary school, which is the grades I teach. I do K through 5. And it was because I was doing some modeling and acting as a kid. And there were people on set who would ask why I was put in certain clothing. And they would say it in front of me. So I would start to internalize that. It was also during the time in the 90s when Fen was a huge deal. So every other commercial was either Jenny Craig or Fen. And the diet culture, I mean, the diet culture is still extremely prevalent and it's very overwhelming on social media. But having grown up in a culture where body image was the main factor for the most part in getting certain jobs as a child, I didn't know how to process that. And even though I was never overweight, I've always been petite, but I've been muscular. So I equated the muscle to being larger because the weight on the scale was larger because muscle is denser. So it weighs more, like, you know, all those things that like feed into your head.
Right.
And when I would see certain numbers, then I would create this image that I was larger than I was because a certain number made it seem like or made me feel larger than I actually appeared. So even to this day, I still have trouble and I struggle with what I do look like in certain clothing. But it was this constant battle, and also being a girl and a female, comparing myself to other females, and being in an industry where you also compare yourself to people on TV and you always hear, oh, the camera adds 10 pounds. Like it was just constantly present. And I would do things like run extra before school. I would bike ride on the weekends, like things that were fun. I did because I thought I had to do them in order to stay a certain shape. And that was something that was that was something I did regardless of whether or not I thought it was right or wrong. I was just very aware that I was doing it even at a young age. So I just have always struggled with this idea of body image, and then shaming myself or feeling guilty if I ate something or I didn't exercise enough. And it just became this cycle that was extremely painful and powerful over my daily life. And I have been able to, for the most part, have it under control. There are things that trigger me, and I'm aware of that. And I'm very open with people when something does happen. And I'm like, I have to tell you, this is something that is not good. And it was brought to my attention that it could become a problem again during the first wave of COVID, because at that time I had to literally fill up all of my freezer with food because nobody knew when you're going to go outside or when you were going to. So I was like fully stocked with food, and I was freaking out because I was like, oh no, I'm going to binge it all now, which didn't happen. But that was the thought process in my head when I went to go get all of these things. And then at one point my microwave broke. So I couldn't even, the stuff I got that was frozen that I was going to put in the microwave, I couldn't use. So then I used that as an excuse. So like these little things that just kept on happening. And I was like, no, this is not healthy behavior. This is not a healthy mindset. And so it was something that I thought I had taken care of. And then just like any normal human being, it reemerged, and I reached out and I got some help for it during COVID. And I'm really happy about that because it's really helped me like hone in and accept that I am only human And just because I thought at one point I had overcome it doesn't mean it's not going to come back again. And now I have better tools to suit me at this part of my journey and my life to help me when I do feel those urges.
I think that is the growth right there, because you said you are aware that it could come back. Like you could have those thoughts, but you have better tools now. And I think that is something that's so important. I mean, I talk a lot about, mental health and wellness on this show, and, people going to therapy. And I mean, I have a therapist. I so look forward to my therapy appointments every other week, but I just think that there are tools that they can give you, because we all have different things that trigger us. I mean, it's, like you said, I mean, I think we all deal with the sense of shaming ourselves about our bodies at different periods. Obviously, like for, me, it was, oh, well, I've gained 30 pounds since COVID. And guess what? I lost, I just lost 50 pounds and I gained 30 back. And I went through this whole period last year, probably like the last 6 months in a year, of just beating myself up about the fact that, how did you do that? How did you let that come back? Like you did all that work and then you got right back here. I can't believe you got fat, it was just all that in my head. And then finally I was like, you know what? Like I cannot do this, because the last 2 years have been hard. Like it has literally been existing has been hard. And so I think by the time I was able to come to terms with even though I wasn't a person who felt I don't feel stress, but obviously it affects us in different ways. And, and I was not really thinking about the fact that life has been hard, a lot of the things that we enjoy, a lot of the things that we do have been, put on hold or sort of taken, halted. And so, once I was able to get to that place of forgiving myself and saying, it's okay, girl, it's okay. You can actually, what to do to get it off. The types of decisions you need to make where as it relates to food. So you just have to make those decisions, and you just have to, but you have to give yourself grace when you say, you know what, I'm going to eat this piece of cake on Saturday and I'm going to enjoy this cake. And, and so once I, getting to that place was very therapeutic for me, and being able, and then getting back into my process of here's what I do, because I was one of those people, I'll say, I was one of those people, I was working out, but I was eating bad. And I told somebody, I was like, yeah, I mean, you can work out all day, but if you're not eating properly, then it's still going to be fat. You're going to be building muscle with fat, and it's just not going to work out in your favor.
It's true. And it becomes a cycle. You're eating for comfort, and then you're working out because you're eating for comfort. And
exactly.
Then you're sad because you're eating for comfort. So you eat more for comfort. It's just this cycle, as I said, which in a way becomes this weird addictive pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And you need to accept and have the awareness that it's happening, or you won't get better. And part of getting better is accepting it, that it is happening, and then understanding what is and is not in your control. Because I think a lot of that has to do with, there's a control issue within an eating disorder. There's so many things that are out of your control, that you think that you can control what you're eating, or you think that you can control how you are prioritizing your exercise, but literally that's what's controlling you. And you get so wrapped up in it that you don't realize that it is no longer in your control.
Yeah. It's just like you said, you walk by the mirror and you're like, who is that? Whose body is that? I was just nope. And I think I told somebody, I said, also the thing I had to come to terms with is that I said, when I realized it is when one day when I had to put on real clothes, and I had to actually put on some jeans and not workout pants. I was like, because I mean, all along, it's like, yeah, you put on a nice top and you wear, stretch bottoms. And that day I was like, whose pants are these? Because these are tight. Like they don't feel like my, my pants anymore. So
Yep, I haven't put on jeans in about 6 months, so I'm just gonna leave it at that.
so I've been able, luckily I'm starting to come back, getting back to the healthy place. So, and it's just, I think too, like you said, it's realizing and accepting, but then also just getting in the mindset like, hey, I could be at home for working at home for even longer time. So you need to figure out how not to indulge in those snacks and eating chips and baking cakes and all those things we were doing in the beginning of the pandemic. And so once, got rid of all that stuff and just got back to, I'm very routine as it relates to my like eating when I'm actually like eating like healthy and balanced meals. It's for me, it's like, okay, yep, I have the same breakfast, or I have the same, it's meal prep for me. And I mean, and I'm okay with that. And it all tastes good going down. And I'm like, and what you find yourself doing is that after a while, I'm like, okay, I'm eating because I need the fuel, not because I'm like starving or whatever. But I agree with you. I mean, one thing I was going to ask you, and you mentioned, you talked about triggers and you talked about diet culture, and, there's not a moment, that any woman or person living a life that gets on social media. And heaven forbid, if you click on one ad that says something about, oh yeah, I want to get maybe a protein shake, or oh, is this a good organic brand? And then you're just flooded with, lose weight this way, do this. Oh, guess what? You don't even have to work out. Just do this thing. And then you just see, of course, they're just people, right? There's everybody out there living a life in social media that, I'm not saying that those people don't live those lives or that they don't have good lives, but you're not usually seeing a person who's looking busted up,
It takes a while to get to that place where you're all cut. Like that's not going to happen from a protein shake. Like
exactly.
I just got to say, this is a spoiler alert. Protein shakes do not give you a six pack.
But, I think for, gosh, I mean, I was just looking at that and thinking about, and something, you said earlier, it's about like, if you're not affirming yourself and your mindset isn't, positioned in a way that, pours into you and pours into the fact that you are, guess what? You're awesome the way you are. It's great. We all want to evolve and be better versions of ourselves. But the you that you are in this moment in today, it's enough. Like it is enough. You are loved. You don't have to look like everybody else posting pictures on Instagram for somebody to love you. And you don't have to try all these ridiculous like things. But, but I was like, God, like if I did not know like who I am or who I'm, like you said, like who am I becoming, then gosh, it would be so hard and you would be so triggered like all the time.
Yeah. Social media is super toxic. And then the fact that the phone listens to you as well, whether or not you believe it or not, like you'll get things just because you're listening to this podcast.
Yeah. I mean, I'm still, even though I know that that's what it does. I mean, I'm still in shock every time that I've just talked about something or I've just looked up something. And then in my Gmail is like, oh, in the promotion side, oh, Kyra, what about such and such and such? And I'm like, no, thanks. I mean, sometimes I appreciate it. Like there are times where I'm like, oh, Google, But then there are sometimes I'm like,
listened.
Yeah, sometimes I'm like, no, thanks. So, but what do you do? What do you do now when you are triggered? How do you deal with that?
I think it depends on the situation. but I usually confront myself and try to figure out why it triggered me. And if I was triggered by somebody, I will find an appropriate time to bring it up, because sometimes people say you need to just like bite the bullet and as soon as it happens, but then they're like, really, it depends circumstantially what's happening within a conversation. So if somebody says something, instead of cutting them off and be like, that's a trigger, you're not allowing them to finish. So I would say allow them to, what I normally do is allow them to finish. And then I figure out, like, do I say something now or do I wait and bring it up and say, hey, earlier we talked about such and such. It made me feel like this. And I think that if you use like the frame, when you said this, it made me feel, it makes people understand more, because they can empathize with the feeling, but they can't empathize with a trigger that they don't have for themselves.
Right.
So
Yes.
I think it's kind of waiting out the situation and knowing an okay time to say it, because while it's important to be able to defend yourself, it's not okay to be defensive about how you're feeling, because then that becomes an attack on another person.
I agree. And I definitely do like that approach, because at the end of the day, you are giving grace and you're also being empathetic to someone else. And I think another thing too is sometimes we don't know what other people are going through. And so you have to sometimes try to put yourself in their shoes. Although, I mean, you're not in their shoes, but I think just the fact of giving grace. And like you said, not being like, hey, stop. Let me tell you, let me reach in front of the room. No. I think there is something to saying, when you said this, it made me feel this way. And I think people are more open and receptive when you come at them that way. So what are ways any that women out there listening or watching, you use your voice to stand up and to advocate, yes, for other women who may be dealing with body shaming? What advice do you give to anyone out there listening who may have gone through something similar as well?
I want to preface it by saying it's hard to put myself, it's okay. I can put myself in someone else's shoes in the sense that I have gone through something similar to somebody else. However, I don't ever like to have a blanket statement or generalize how somebody could possibly be feeling in a moment of weakness when they're challenged with some sort of body shaming, body dysmorphia, because it's all manifested from personal experiences. I do want to, I think the thing I like to drive home is that you are not alone. So at any point, there is a woman out there who is feeling like that. And while you might not feel like you are able to reach out, there are plenty, despite certain things that are fed to you on social media, there are plenty of advocates who have empowering quotes or have reels or have certain things from experiences they've gone through. And I say that something I do is find those people who are positive in their approach to recovery and follow them. In the moment that I find myself being triggered by something somebody is saying, I will block them, because at the end of the day, it's not about, yes, it's about them, for them growing followers if they are huge influencers. But at the same time, it's not worth my mental health, because if I've been triggered once, I already have this thought in my head that I could potentially be triggered again. And it's not worth scrolling in the feed and maybe stumbling upon something that will trigger me again. And the thing is you could just be caught off guard on like you're having a bad day and you read something and it hits you wrong. So you want to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it's okay. You don't have to. There's more people out there who have stories that are similar to yours and want to share their story and want to hear your story. There are so many people out there who are going to make you feel supported, so that one person that in that moment when you feel challenged or weakened by something, it's okay to block them. Like 100%. No one's going to get offended. Like it's out there.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, you're just protecting your peace. Like, I mean, you're just protecting yourself. And I mean, I think a lot of people can experience that and be triggered by different things in different ways. Like, you know, if there are, like, I'll use like for an example for me. And sometimes I just mute this person. Like, you know, you see other like people that are like entrepreneurs, and it's like, oh, you know, sometimes like as an entrepreneur, sometimes you can't like quite take the, you know, oh, it feels more like not it comes across as like gloating, and it may not be that like, and but I know there's other times where I'm very inspired by these conversations, but for me it might just not be. I may be having a moment where I'm like, oh yeah, it's hard being an entrepreneur, and I just can't take seeing somebody talk about like how they're, you know, winning at it right now. I just need to mute your stories for like, give me a week. Let me just get my mind, you know, let me get my mental like in a good place to be able to like embrace what you have to say, because it is good information. And so that's just, I mean, I definitely agree that you have to do that.
and also, I think something else that's important is to know that at any given time, your feelings are valid. So just because you're trying so hard to have somebody else understand how you're feeling, they might not have the capacity to understand what you're thinking because they haven't been through what you've gone through. And that's okay. I think that in those moments when you really feel like it's hard to connect, those are the times when you need to pull out a journal, paint, listen to a song you like. Those are those times when you need to reconnect with yourself, because if you are trying to fill a void by trying to get somebody else, if you feel like you're dependent on somebody else's validation, it's not going to happen in that moment. It's going to only happen when you validate yourself.
Exactly. That's so true. So true. Great. Good advice. Good advice. So let's talk about what you are working on and what's coming for you and the ways. I'm excited for you. Definitely with your books and this new podcast that you're launching.
Yeah. So I'm actually launching a brand new podcast in February, like literally fresh off the presses. Nobody knows. It's called Hungry to Live, naturally. Hungry, the number 2 live.com. And I'm going to be talking to people from all walks of life who have actually gone through something that was life-changing and had created some sort of moment where they thought they weren't going to be able to go on anymore, and how they've become successful from that point. And I don't want to minimize that through the lens of eating disorders. Of course, that's the lens that I look through, but I think it's super important for people who are first generation to have a space to talk about how they've become successful and being the first person in their family maybe to get a college degree. People who have lived with those who have all sorts of addiction or even personal addiction. Also, as a special ed teacher, the advocacy for those who have either learning disabilities, physical disabilities, or any ways that they've been impacted by society and by these labels, and how they've become successful or have grown a platform, or even those parents who have had to embrace the fact that they have children who have disabilities and what that looks like to be successful in a family unit with living with a child with disabilities, like things like that. Like there's just so much to be said about everyone, because everyone does have a story, and most people have had to overcome something to get to where they are. And we don't really have a space to talk about that. And I think it's really important for anyone to be able to speak about these moments. And at first I wanted to do all women. And then I was like, you know what? I'm not going to limit, as much as I'm very women forward and like women empowerment, but I think it's really important that we hear stories from both genders, especially in a time where the idea of gender and sexism and societal norms around gender are being questioned. And also the fact that people are living differently and some people are accepting of it and some people aren't. And we need, as a society, a place where people just have that space to talk openly about all of these things.
Yes.
So hungry to live, although as I said, through my lens, it's the lens of recovery. And that's how I'm going to come into all of the interviews. But at the same time, I'm not only interviewing the lens, I'm not only interviewing people in recovery, because I think that it's important for everyone's voice to be heard.
I love that. Yeah, it sounds awesome, and I can't wait to hear it and to support you.
Thank you.
So what about your books? When are we going to get books from you?
I know. So that's the question I keep asking the universe. But I'm currently seeking either representation or publishers. I have a series currently of 4 children's books, expanding it to maybe 6. Kind of all started. I have a student who was diagnosed with leukemia, and I couldn't find a book about childhood cancer that I liked. So I was like, I'm going to write one. And it kind of came from this idea of, while the child has cancer, it also affects the community around. So it's told through the eyes of the child's best friend. And it gives coping mechanisms and ways to help the best friend feel supported. So then in turn, he can support his best friend in treatment. And I have, again, one on eating disorders, or not necessarily eating disorders, but body image. And it's the main character. She is built normal, or as if she was just a regular 5th grade student, and she wants to look just like the girl who sits next to her in math, who's super tall and skinny and has a model-like face. And then they start having a conversation, and she asks the girl how it feels to be pretty, how it feels to be tall and pretty. I think those were the words I used. And or skinny and pretty. Those were her specific words. And she said, I wish I looked like you. You are a normal 5th grader. And so it goes to show that you never know how somebody else is feeling, even though you have a perception of them.
Yes.
Then there's a story about bullying, about how people in the classroom treat someone one way, and then out on the yard, they like to make fun of this person, and how this girl finds her voice and is able to stand up for herself. And then the other one is the COVID book that I talked about earlier.
Awesome. I love those. They all sound, well, we're going to definitely be sending you positive vibes.
Thank you.
That you get a publisher. Anyone out there listening, if you want to represent or publish Rachel's books, contact her.
Please.
Speaking of, how can someone contact you if they want to talk to you or connect to you?
So you are able to contact me through the website for my new podcast. You can either subscribe, drop a line. There's a place where you can write something, and I will get to it. Or you can find me on Instagram. It is also hungry _to_live. And that is, that's about it.
Hey, those are two great ways to find you. Well,
yeah.
So, well,
just to like be clear, the handle hungry to live by itself was not available. So it's hungry dot to the number 2 dot live. Just so.
Mhm. And we'll make sure that this is in the show notes as well so that people can link over to you easily. Okay, well, this has been such a great discussion. I feel like even though we haven't talked for, like you said, about 9 months, it feels like picking back up with somebody that I talked to like the other day.
I know. That's how I felt when I got off the phone with you the first time for the pre-interview.
And so, but before I let you go, I'm going to ask you, I like to say 3 things. So just asking a few more questions that help people out there to get to know you a little bit better. I always like to start with, how do you start the day?
By snoozing my alarm. No, to be honest, I snooze my alarm because it's just so hard to wake up in the morning. But as I said earlier, I am starting to implement doing self affirmations when I first wake up. I catch myself sometimes going on social media first, and I like throw my phone down. I'm like, no, you need to tell yourself something nice about yourself.
Exactly.
And then I pick up my phone and I start going again.
All right. So what do you do on a day off? What is something you enjoy doing?
Oh, sleeping. I don't get to do it enough. Anyone who knows me is like, no, you nap all the time. I nap to recharge because I'm constantly going.
Mhm.
But I've found ways to relax. I've never been able to relax in my life. And finally, COVID has helped provide me the space to figure out how to just calm myself. And on my days off, when I don't have plans, like I really just I live for the days when I can sit outside in the sun with some music on and just nothing, like be one with nature and reconnect. I love to say I like to be grounded. I sit on the ground. There's chairs, there's lounge chairs. Nope. I like to lay on the ground and be grounded and just feel myself with the earth.
I like it. I like it. And how do you end the day?
How do I end the day? I've been really trying to end the day by doing my last texts about 30 minutes before I know I'm going to go to sleep, and I put my phone down. And sometimes I watch TV, and then after an episode I just turn my TV off and I don't look at my phone. I'm like, this is what I have to do. I find myself, if I am texting until I go to sleep, I'll just continue to stay awake. But I can completely zone out and watch something on TV and then turn it off after the episode and fall asleep.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. I mean, I started to do that for myself, to like just stop looking at your phone. And sometimes like I would play games on my phone as a way to like relax, but I was like, nope. But when you do that, then you end up looking at Twitter, you end up looking at Instagram, or you end up checking emails. And so I just finally just started like saying, nope, turning the phone over and watching TV. And I'm just going to watch something on, I watch a lot of things like on Adult Swim. So I watch like cartoons, and I just like, then I'm going to bed. And that eases my brain from like still being, because it's like always on. If not, then I'm just always thinking about like, okay, and then I need to do this, I need to do this, and let me just go, I'm just going to get up and write a list. And I'm like, no, I want to go to sleep.
Yep. I 100% understand that. So it's like watching something that's mindless, because then your mind can go numb. I'm not advocating to numb yourself. I'm just saying that you need to just have something to like block out every place, and then you're
everybody's got to have their thing, right? Awesome. Well, thank you, Rachel, so much for coming on the show and joining us. And I'm so excited about your show. I wish you all the success, my friend. You deserve it.
Thank you.
And please, please, please come back and see me again.
I would love to. And I would love to have you on my show.
Yes, always there for that, girl. Well, stay tuned, everyone. I'll be right back.